Rest easy, folks. Gonzaga's international pipeline, it's alive and well.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, lots to cover today. Julian Strawther had his NBA playoff moment. We're going to talk about that to close out the show. We're also going to provide an update from 2026 recruiting target Sam Funches, one of the top centers in that recruiting class. We also got a mid-major guard transfer the Zags are in contact with. We'll talk about him in the second segment. But first, we're going to have ourselves a Mario party here on the Locked On Zags podcast as Gonzaga's pursuit of Spanish guard Mario Saint-Supery has elevated. It is not confirmed as of this recording, as we are going live 3 p.m., a little after 3 p.m. Apologies for being a little late on Friday, May 16th. But by all accounts, it is expected that Gonzaga will land their first international recruit of the 2025-26 cycle in Mario Saint-Supery. This report comes from Eurohoops.net, which was the article was published on Thursday, indicating from a reporter named Chemade Lucas that Saint-Supery, is leaving the program he's playing with in Spain and is coming over to Gonzaga for this upcoming season. Now, this is not the first time that Saint-Supery has been connected to Gonzaga. The name has been floating around for kind of the entire offseason. For those of you who are really plugged in, who are connected to kind of the various different places that report on Gonzaga-related rumors, this is probably not a new name to you. For everybody else, this probably is a new name, and so I'm reporting it as still not a done deal yet, but it is very, very close. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a done deal by the end of the weekend. I would be very shocked if it doesn't end up being a done deal at all. This is something that is very likely going to happen. In fact, I can say this, a former Gonzaga transfer portal target, I will not give the specific name, but this player was planning to visit Spokane. This happened a while ago. This happened in like early April, was planning a visit to Spokane, had listed Gonzaga in his top 3, top 5, something like that. The reason the visit did not happen, the reason he ended up transferring to a different school in the ACC is because Gonzaga was so invested at the time in trying to convince Mario Saint-Supery to come to Spokane, to come to Gonzaga, that they kind of pushed some of the other transfer portal targets to the side. And that's what happened with this particular player. And again, that was probably a month, maybe even 6 weeks ago that happened. So this is a name that's been on the radar for a while. And now, again, while it's still not official, we can start to kind of take a look at who Saint-Supery is, what his game is, what his play style looks like, and how this might fit in Spokane. And of course, when this does become finalized, whether it's an hour from now, a day from now, next week, next month, then we'll have our true Mario party where we'll actually celebrate what he brings to the team. But for now, we're just going to kind of do a bit of an introduction on Saint-Supery and who he is. He's a 6'3", very recently turned 19-year-old guard from Malaga, Spain. His birthday is in April. So again, he was 18 a month ago. He's just turned 19. So he's pretty much he's basically the age of a traditional freshman, maybe a little bit older, but certainly in that mix. He played his most recent season with Baxi Manresa in Liga ACB in Spain, where he averaged a little over 6 points, a little under 4 assists, and about 2.5 rebounds per game. Now, you may hear those numbers and think, all right, a dude who barely averaged 6 points per game in Europe, like, why should we be excited? Well, he was playing against grown men. He was playing against 25, 28, 32-year-olds as an 18-year-old and putting up nearly 4 assists per game. That's tremendous to be able to have the floor vision, the just skill set, the basketball IQ to be able to find your teammates in positions to succeed when you're that age, and then to gain that experience. And And I think it's important to acknowledge here for folks who are maybe still catching up with the massive amount of rule changes that have happened in college basketball over the last half decade or so. Players who play professionally overseas, there are rules now that allow them to play college basketball. The rules are still kind of being ironed out. And as with almost everything in the modern era of college basketball, we need some level of guardrails. And there is some very recent reporting that there are conversations happening between FIBA and NCAA to hopefully kind of narrow this down a little bit so that teams aren't grabbing like 30-year-old 10-year vets from Europe or anything like that. But Saint-Supery is a player who can play in college basketball, who is allowed to come over to the United States, will have 4 years of eligibility, just like any other true freshman would, despite having already played some professional basketball overseas in Europe. In fact, the team he played with prior to his time with Baxi Manresa was Unicaja in the Liga ACB, also a Spanish league. And that's the same team that Julian Strawther is currently playing for. I don't think they were teammates. I don't think that they lined up, but just in case you want to know what kind of players that Saint-Supery was teammates with. I mean, Julian Strawther is a seasoned vet. He's been a pro basketball player for a half decade now, played in the NBA for a brief period of time. So those are the kind of players that Saint-Supery has been playing alongside, playing against, matching up against as a freshly turned 19-year-old. I think that is a really important context for who this player is as he makes his way over to the United States and likely to Gonzaga. He also spent time is currently on the Spanish national team in the FIBA Eurobasket 2025 qualifiers, and he was with the U18 FIBA team in 2024, where he put up some monster numbers. This is the last time he played against players his age. So, of course, his numbers playing against professionals were a little bit lower, but in a U18 tournament in 2024, Saint-Supery averaged 21.5 points, 6.5 assists, and 5.5 rebounds per game. This dude is got a sky-high upside. And I think that's the biggest detail, the biggest important, relevant point about Saint-Supery at this point is that he is an upside play for Mark Few and the Zags. I wouldn't be surprised if he is ready to play legitimate minutes for this Gonzaga program next year right away. I wouldn't be surprised about that. But the main pull for Saint-Supery is what his upside could be with a year or 2 or 3 in this Gonzaga system. And you watch the videos. If you haven't seen them yet, you can find the articles that talk about this potential connection to Gonzaga. You can find some clips on YouTube. Just Google his name or find the videos there. You can see why Mark Few and the staff are interested in this young man. His floor vision is excellent. He loves to push the pace. The amount of times that he caught an outlet pass, took 1 or 2 dribbles, and found a teammate streaking down the floor for an easy bucket. We've seen that time and time and time again. We had the Nembhard brothers for 4 years basically doing exactly that for Gonzaga. So this is a guy who is going to push the tempo. He's going to push the pace. He's going to get Gonzaga out in transition. But even in the half-court offense, you can see he's really confident. He's a catch-and-shoot three-point guy who knocked down a lot of shots, looked really comfortable doing that. There was a play in one of the highlights where he missed the shot. Teammate got the rebound. He relocated to a different spot, caught the pass, and yanked again and knocked it down. And just to have the confidence to pull that shot after just missing, again, with the context that he was an 18-year-old playing against guys 7, 8, 10 years older than him, and he's still knocking down outside shots, playing with some arrogance, some confidence. He's got a really good package of moves to get to the rim. We saw that in a lot of the video clips as well. He's got a little floater game. He could adjust midair to get contact and get the shot to go down. Really comfortable playing in space, really comfortable with finding the passing lanes, finding the driving lanes, kicking out to shooters on the perimeter. Just looked like a really comfortable, confident, push the pace facilitating type guard. And that's what Gonzaga has made their name with. That's why the Nembhards were so successful here, because of the skill sets that they had. And Mark Few's offense really kind of exacerbated that in an excellent way for the two of them. That's why Andrew's having so much success. That's why Ryan has put himself on the NBA draft radar with some incredible performances at the Combine, because of how well he adjusted to that role at Gonzaga. Saint-Supery is the kind of guy who could do exactly that. And he's going to have more than just 2 years at Gonzaga if he wants it, because he's got 4 full years of eligibility once he gets to campus in a couple of months here, most likely. So really excited about this addition for Gonzaga, potential addition for Gonzaga at this point. I think anybody who's looking at the numbers and seeing the actual stats that he posted in this most recent season, who's down on him, really, I think the context of his age and his performance there is really important. And I think this is a kid who, again, it's always a mixed bag with international players. And I do think that is important to acknowledge. Gonzaga's success rate with international recruits is very, very good. Very, very good. Domantas Sabonis, Rui Hachimura. I mean, those are two of the biggest ones, but Filip Petrusev, Roni Turioff, Killian Tilly, who we mentioned earlier, even the Canadian prospects, Kevin Pangos, Kyle Wiltshire, like they have had so much success with international recruits. Shemek Karnowski, would be remiss if I didn't mention one of my all-time favorites. They have had misses too. They have had players who came over with fanfare who didn't have as much success. Martinas Arlauskas, Pavel Zakharov. They've had a handful of other ones as well. And so it's not like it's impossible for Saint-Supery to like he's guaranteed to be successful. I don't want to necessarily throw that on him, but I do think that the upside is really, really good here. The Zags have been heavily pursuing him for months now. We do know that. We can confirm that on the show. And I don't think that they would be that invested in bringing over a player like Saint-Supery if they didn't think that he had a real chance to be a game-changing addition for this program. Like I said, we'll talk more about this addition once it becomes finalized and what it means for the roster, his specific role in year one, all that good stuff. But for right now, I want to move on and talk about another guard that Mark Few and the Zags have been connected to as they continue to pursue more depth in the backcourt. Recently been connected to Charleston guard AJ Smith out of the transfer portal. We're going to discuss Smith's fit in Spokane and more coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, there's nothing like the NBA playoffs. Ask Denver Nuggets fans after Thursday night. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you have to experience live. And this year's matchups, they are already delivering. And if you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app, they actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a complete game changer. I love that I can see the exact view from my seat before I buy and the exact price. There's no surprise fees at checkout. And with the Game Time guarantee, you know you're getting the best deal. If you find a better price in the same row and section, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. Well, Nuggets Thunder Game 7 is on Sunday. We're going to talk about why there is a Game 7 in the final segment, but you can get tickets to that game if you're in the Oklahoma City area for under $200. Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, there is nothing better than a Game 7 between two MVP candidates. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Game Time. Download the Game Time app now, create an account, and if you use code LOCKEDONCollege, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Moving away from our conversation about very likely international guard addition Mario Saint-Supery to instead talk about a player that Gonzaga was connected to in the transfer portal earlier on Friday. That would be Charleston guard AJ Smith. Smith is a 6'4" guard originally from Charlotte, North Carolina. He was not a highly regarded recruit out of high school. He was a zero-star recruit who committed to the Citadel in the class of 2022. He did have offers from other local programs, including Charlotte, Elon, Hampton, and Rice. Not a local program in Rice there, out of the American Athletic Conference. As a true freshman at the Citadel, he played 29 games, played about 17 minutes per game, and was a pretty solid player, a role player for that team in his first year. 6 points, 3 boards, efficient scorer, was not a great three-point shooter. He was, in fact, 3 of 26 from the three-point line as a true freshman. That's good for a solid 11.5%. But then he broke out in a major way as a sophomore. Still at the Citadel in his sophomore season in 23-24, AJ Smith went out and in 29 games, 32 minutes per game. He went out and averaged 16 points, 4.5 boards, a little over 1 assist per game. The three-point shooting, which was, again, 11.5% as a freshman, bumped all the way up to 35.5% as a sophomore, and that was on 3.5 attempts per game. So very solid shooter in that sophomore season at the Citadel. He was also about 49% on his two-pointers and about 80% from the free throw line on a little under 4 attempts per game. After those 2 seasons at the Citadel, Smith hits the transfer portal, lands at Charleston, a program that was rebuilding after losing head coach Pat Kelsey to Louisville. They replaced Pat Kelsey by hiring former Louisville head coach Chris Mack, and Charleston was very good last year, 24-9. They unfortunately lost in the CAA semifinals to UNC Wilmington, so they did not make the NCAA tournament despite being one of the better teams, if not the best team in their conference last year. And Smith was a big part of it. In 30 games, he made 22 starts, played about 25 minutes per game, and he averaged 11.5 points, 3 boards, and about 1 assist. Now, unfortunately, the three-point shooting regressed. Did not regress all the way back to 11.5% like he shot as a freshman, but it did regress down to 25% on about 2.5 attempts per game. He went 19 of 76 from the three-point line as a junior in his first season, his lone season at Charleston. Now, he was still about 50% on two-pointers. He was still over 75% from the free throw line. He still took over 3.5 free throw attempts per game, so he was effective at getting to the line. He was effective at converting from the free throw line. He was an effective two-point scorer, but unfortunately, the three-point shot, which looked passable in his second season, looked a little bit less passable in his 1 season at Charleston. But still, we saw Smith have 10 games where he scored 15 or more points. He had 4 games with 20 or more points. He is a high volume scorer who has solid efficiency numbers as well. He had some really strong performances, 18 points on 6 of 10 shooting in a road win over a very good St. Joe's team out of the A10. St. Joe's, one of their best players, Rasheer Fleming, is likely going to be a lottery pick this year. So that was a very talented roster that Smith had a huge hand in Charleston getting a win over. He also had 13 points on 4 of 7 shooting in a massive 2 overtime win in the very beginning of the season against Florida Atlantic, one of the best games of the entire college basketball season last year. And again, Smith had a big part in that. Now, the report is that Gonzaga is one of the latest teams to contact A.J. Smith out of the transfer portal. This came from an account called The Portal Report on Twitter, who said, Gonzaga, James Madison, Temple, New Mexico, and Fordham are the most recent teams to contact A.J. Smith, who, quote, should be making a decision soon. Now, there was also a tweet from the same account, The Portal Report, back on May 1st, so about 2 weeks ago, that initially listed the schools that have reached out to A.J. Smith. That list has got a little bit more cachet on it. Duke, that's a pretty good start. Washington, Utah, BYU, UNLV, Seton Hall, George Mason, and Minnesota. There was a couple other teams on that list, but those were the big heavy hitters who initially reached out to A.J. Smith in the transfer portal back on May 1st. Again, it's been 2 weeks, and then another list of schools comes out, and then the report is that Smith is close to making a decision. I'm not a betting man. I'm certainly not a betting man. And when it comes to where transfers are going to end up, I do not envy the folks who do professionally try to guess or gamble on where these players end up. It's not a very fun job. But I'll say this. A.J. Smith's a lot more likely to end up at one of those 5 schools on the recent tweet than he is on one of the schools in the first tweet from May 1st. In part because I think most of those programs have filled the holes they were looking to fill when they initially contacted A.J. Smith in the portal. So I would guess that between the 5 schools, Gonzaga, James Madison, Temple, New Mexico, Fordham, you're probably looking at where he ultimately ends up. Now, it's worth noting, and this is not analysis really at all other than a fun-ish fact, James Madison had a player on their roster last year named A.J. Smith. A.J. Smith from James Madison hit the transfer portal and landed at Bradley. Now, this A.J. Smith is being pursued by James Madison. I think it would be hilarious if they landed another player named A.J. Smith and had 2 different A.J. Smiths on their roster in back-to-back years. I cannot think of something more confusing, alienating, and frustrating for the James Madison fan base than having to deal with that happening. But I do think that it would be hilarious. So if he's not going to end up at Gonzaga, I am rooting for him to end up at James Madison. I think New Mexico makes a ton of sense as a team rebuilding under new head coach Eric Olin. Certainly don't want to rule out Temple or Fordham as quality mid-major programs as well. But the fit at Gonzaga is he's very similar to a lot of the players Gonzaga has been pursuing recently in the transfer portal. I do think that going back to our initial conversation on Saint-Supery, if he ends up coming to Gonzaga, which it sounds like is all but wrapped up at this point, I'm not sure there's a ton of room for more guard additions on this roster. Gonzaga already has Braden Smith, the redshirt from last year, stepping into a role. Jalen Warley, who redshirted last year, stepping into a role. They have returners Emmanuel Innocente stepping into a role, or keeping his role from last year, maybe expanding on it. Steele Venters, if he is healthy, is going to play bigger minutes next year. And then you got the newcomers, Adam Miller out of the transfer portal from Arizona State. And then Davis Fogel, the incoming freshman, and then potentially Saint-Supery as well. If all those players are in the mix and healthy, and I think that is a question with Steele, and certainly with somebody like Fogel, how ready they are to play big minutes right away. But if everybody's ready to roll, kind of hard to see where those other minutes would come from. And if you're, pursuing a Desmond Claude or a Tyon Grant Foster, we talked about both those players on Thursday's episode of Locked On Zags. Yeah, you're going to find a spot for those guys. They're incredibly talented. Grant Foster's a former WAC player of the year, averaged 20 points per game. Desmond Claude is a high level scorer who's done it in the Big East and the Big Ten. Those two guys are starting. They're playing huge minutes. They're probably your second or third leading scorer, maybe even leading scorer, depending on if Huff and Ike take touches from each other. So you're going to go ahead and make those additions, no doubt about it. But a guy like Smith, I don't know that he fits if you're also getting Saint-Supery. But he's kind of a similar player, just a similar player to Grant Foster and Desmond Claude stylistically, just not nearly as good. So it sort of feels like he's kind of a backup plan, but I am a little unsure how I don't know that you need a backup plan, because if you get those guys, again, they're starters, they're playing big minutes. But if you're not getting a guy who's going to start and play big minutes for you, I'm not sure you need more depth, assuming Saint-Supery is a done deal coming to Gonzaga. But he's a 6'4" non-point guard who scores at a high volume. That is who AJ Smith is. That is who Desmond Claude is, except he's a little bit bigger and has more point guard skills. And that's who Tyon Grant Foster is, albeit again, a little bit bigger. He does not have point guard skills, but he is a bigger two guard who is a high volume scorer. AJ Smith's a smaller two guard who is a high volume scorer, but is not much of a floor spacer or 3-point shooter. He loves to get downhill. He loves to attack the basket. He's good at getting to the free throw line. I think that the skill sets that he has could fit in Spokane, could fit in Gonzaga's offense. I think having a guard who's willing to attack closeouts, who's willing to get to the rim and the free throw line is something that could be very valuable on this roster and could help take some pressure off Graham and Braid in the front court. I'm not 100% sold that AJ Smith is the guy. And I think that looking at kind of the roster as it currently stands, if he were to commit to Gonzaga, I'm not sure I see a guaranteed rotation spot for him. Again, I think Steele Venters' health is a big question mark. Game readiness for Davis Fogel is a big question mark. But ultimately, I'm looking at a guy who I think is a borderline rotation player at Gonzaga, and that's without counting Saint-Supery in the rotation. If he does commit, I have a hard time seeing where AJ Smith fits in. Having said that, Gonzaga contacted him for a reason. There is obvious talent here. Using Evan Miyakawa's data and his projections for kind of the percentiles that these players will finish in key stats next year. He's pretty pedestrian in most of the categories, but his scoring volume, 92nd percentile. This is what he's good at. He is a high usage, high volume scorer when he is on the floor. And that does seem to be a trend in terms of the players that Gonzaga is pursuing right now in the transfer portal. So it is something to keep an eye on, even if I'm not sure AJ Smith's specific fit on this roster as it is currently constructed. Well, folks, we got an update directly from 2026 recruiting target Sam Funches. We're going to share what he said to me, plus we're going to celebrate Julian Strawther's big moment in Game 6 of the NBA playoffs. All of that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the days are getting longer, the weather's warming up, and people are spending more time outside, which means it's the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or just a small balcony, Wayfair has everything that you need to make it feel more like you. Wayfair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation seats to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all, and at prices that fit your budget. So grab a new patio dining set and some string lights from Wayfair to help extend your outdoor space. And whether you're entertaining guests or just relaxing solo on that outdoor space, shop Wayfair to help you unwind. I like the mix of different styles that Wayfair has to offer. They make it super easy to find pieces that match your vibe. And again, you don't have to spend a fortune to get them. The delivery is free and hassle-free, even for their big items. So shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online. This summer, get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, folks, we are closing out the show, continuing our conversation about recruits and Gonzaga targets. We talked about a very likely addition coming in the international ranks in Mario Saint-Supery. In the first segment, we talked about a player Gonzaga has contacted in the transfer portal in Charleston guard A.J. Smith. In the second segment, and before we talk about the greatness that was Julian Strawther on Thursday night in Denver, we are going to talk about Sam Funches. And for those of you who are everyday listeners, first of all, thank you. Shout out to you all. I appreciate it. We talked about Sam Funches just a couple of days ago on Tuesday's live show on Tuesday afternoon. He's a player who Gonzaga has been in contact with Sam Funches for a while. He is the second ranked center in the 2026 recruiting class, a 6'10" big man from Mississippi. And we talked about him on Tuesday's show because it sounds like he is working on rescheduling a visit to Gonzaga after his visit in February got canceled. And he's also in contact with Ole Miss, and Kansas has been in the mix. Cal's in the mix. He has plans to take visits to a couple other SEC schools, Vandy, LSU, and Mississippi State. After I had that conversation on Tuesday's show, I was contacted by Sam Funches himself, who gave me a couple tidbits of additional information regarding his planned visit to Spokane and a couple other interesting tidbits as well. Funches told me that he is working on setting up his visit, and there are two dates that they're discussing. One of them is June 27th through June 29th. One of them is, as he put it, Midnight Madness. I'm assuming that's a reference to Craziness in the Kennel. So the Zags are looking at either getting him out for Craziness in the Kennel in October or for June 27th through 29th, which many of you hearing that, your ears probably burned a little bit because you know that the last weekend in June, pretty big weekend in the city of Spokane, as that is Hoop Fest. Gonzaga's pulling out all the stops. Their ideal times to visit that are not in season, which again, they plan to have them come in season. But if they're going to have you visit campus and it's not going to happen during the season when you can come to a game at the Kennel, they want you to show up for Craziness. They almost always have high-profile visitors during Craziness in the Kennel. Nick Caminio was there a couple of times. Nolan Traore was there recently. That's when Jalen Suggs and Chet Holmgren visited. So that is a big time in the calendar when Gonzaga likes to have their visitors. And then Hoop Fest. We've seen times when they've had big time visitors for Hoop Fest as well. So this is not new. This is not surprising that these are the weekends that Gonzaga is targeting for Sam Funches, but it was great to hear from him directly about that. And then he also let me know, and maybe this was public information that I missed, and so I apologize to all of you, and I apologize to Sam, but the reason that his visit was postponed in February was pretty simple. His team was still in the state playoffs. He was still playing hoops. So he had to postpone the visit that was scheduled for, I believe, the weekend of the Santa Clara game. I think it was like February. I remember it was Valentine's Day weekend. It was like the 15th through the 17th, whatever those weekend days were. That's when he was planning to visit. It got canceled at the time. There was like, oh, is he no longer interested? Did Ole Miss like kind of convince him to stay in state? What was the deal there? But no, it sounds like he is still very much interested in Gonzaga. Again, I did not contact him. He reached out to me to let me know these things about his visiting schedule. So that's an encouraging sign that he is invested and interested in Gonzaga. And again, the reason for the visit being postponed makes a lot more sense out of that context. Funches also let me know that he is no longer 6'10", 195, which is what it lists him at on 24/7 Sports' rankings or on their site. I think it also lists him at 6'10" on On3 as well, the two kind of most notable recruiting profiles sites that are out there right now. But Funches said, I'm 7 feet and I am 220 pounds. He sent me a link to a video that kind of confirmed that. So even better. And this is something about, and this is no criticism or knock on 247 or On3. They both do a lot of great work, but oftentimes those measurements are out of date. And when you're talking about professional players and it's been 2 years and they haven't been remeasured, well, the odds of them changing their height are pretty limited. But when you're talking about a 15-year-old and now a 17-year-old, it's not crazy to think that they've grown a couple inches and gained 30, 40 pounds. So for Sam Funches, he is 7 foot, 220 pounds. He's a bigger player than he's listed at. If Gonzaga can bring in a player at that size with his skill set, he's an elite rim protector out of high school. He's a good scorer around the rim, tenacious rebounder. This is a potential huge addition for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. And they know it. They know it because they want to bring him out for either Hoop Fest or Craziness, because they know those are the days that people want to see him. That's when Spokane is at its absolute best outside of an actual game at the McCarthy Athletic Center. So shout out to Sam. Shout out to him for reaching out. I appreciate that. Looking forward to hearing more once that visit gets actually scheduled and finalized for him. But this is absolutely a player worth keeping a very close eye on for those who follow Gonzaga's recruiting storylines. Well, we're almost out of time, so we don't get to spend as much time on this as I'd like to, but holy crap, Julian Strawther was awesome on Thursday in Game 6 between the Denver Nuggets and the Oklahoma City Thunder. We've been waiting for him to have his moment. Chet Holmgren had his moment with one of the most statistically insane games in the first round of the playoffs against Memphis. Andrew Nembhard seems to have moment after moment after moment in the NBA playoffs, leading his team to a massive victory to get them into the Eastern Conference Finals over Cleveland. He had moments in the playoffs last year. Chet's had his moments. Andrew's had his moments. The only other player currently in the playoffs, still in the playoffs, I should say, out of Gonzaga is Julian Strawther. And in the first half, in that game, he had not had his moment. He hadn't even scored yet. But then in the third quarter, Julian Strawther went nuts. He had a personal 8-0 run as part of a longer 10-0 run that Denver went on late in the third quarter to give them a lead. They kept that lead. They picked up a W, 119-107, forcing Game 7 in this series. Strawther finished the game with 15 points in 19 minutes off the bench, 3 of 4 from 3. He was awesome. What an incredible game from him. If you were on social media, I have multiple screenshots where every single post on Twitter, every single post on Instagram, every single post on every account was about Julian Strawther, every single one of them. The amount of people who came up with the Julian Strawther game as their creative tweet or article headline or whatever, everybody was saying it. And it was. Julian Strawther was unbelievable. We know he's a clutch player. We know that not just from his incredible game-winning 3 against UCLA in the NCAA tournament in 2023, but that same year in the regular season when he hit a game-winning 3 against, I believe it was BYU in the regular season as well. Julian Strawther is an absolute bucket. He is incredibly clutch. He is tough as nails. This dude lost a crown during the game and just kept on playing. One of the ball boys had to go grab it off the floor when the team was on the other side of the court. Just incredible stuff from Julian. I am so happy. Andrew and Julian are 2 players that I will always root for. They're 2 that I absolutely love, not just from their time in Spokane, but their story as kind of unheralded guys who got drafted higher than they were expected to get drafted, and then kind of had to deal with the accompanying extra pressure of like, well, now you were a first-round pick, or in Andrew's case, now you're the richest second-round pick ever. Like, you got to deliver. Both those guys have absolutely delivered. Julian now has his moment. So much fun to see that happen for him on Thursday night. That's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much to those of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. We'll be back with you all on Monday, hopefully to report the finalization of Mario Saint-Supery coming to Gonzaga. If not, we'll have more about him. We'll talk more about him. We'll talk more about other transfer portal targets. We'll keep you up to date on what's going on with Ryan Nembhard and his pursuit of getting selected in the NBA draft, all that and more. But folks, have a fantastic weekend. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you have not done so yet. And until next time, as always, go Zags.